All right, great. We're recording. Hey, Logan Community. It's Fred, your community organizer again. I'm back. I'm really excited to be here. We have Kari Graves here, and we're going to have a dope
Absolutely.
conversation. Oh, and we're going to continue to have, this dope conversation around gun violence in our community, talking solutions. This is a part of the Soul Shots Portraits of Gun Violence exhibit and programming that's happening at the Logan Library. I know I keep saying this, y'all, but I really mean this that at some point, y'all will be able to come into the library and see the exhibits. And as soon as that happens, we will be letting you all know. But without further ado, we're going to just jump right on in. So, hey, Corey. Hey.
What's going on, Fred? Peace, Logan Community. How are y'all? Good
Um,
morning, everyone out there.
Great. Would you like to take the opportunity to just introduce who you are, where you're from?
For sure. My name is Khari Graves. I'm a Philadelphia native from South Philly, and I currently work as a youth outreach counselor at AVP, Anti-Violence Partnership in Philadelphia. And I'm glad to be here talking with y'all this morning.
Oh, that is awesome. And we're really excited to have you with us today. Or should I say I, since I'm the only person here. Um, yeah, so this again is an ongoing conversation around gun violence. Um, and so I guess in your role at the Anti-Violence Project, how have you seen gun violence, right? Like what are the impacts that you're seeing?
Of course, when we talk about gun violence, we automatically talk about trauma, but there's so many different layers to that. So, of course, we see the direct trauma, which may be the mental or physical trauma of somebody that had a violent act inflicted upon them, the mental trauma of people uh, who had loved ones that were victims of violence, seeing them having to deal with it, or even hearing about them having to deal with it. And that's something we really noticed that violence can have a huge ripple effect. Sometimes you don't even have to be there, but you still feel that, especially if it's someone you're close to. And also, a trauma I see, especially working with young people, is something that is almost like a psychic devaluation of their community and even themselves. The repeated violence, they begin to lose faith and hope, and they don't see the value in their own communities. They don't see the value in the communities where these things happen. They don't see value in the people in these communities, which I think is one of the most detrimental uh, forces that this gun violence has wrought on our communities, where people, they don't even see the value in their own communities, their own people, as they should. But I think that is not just a byproduct of the trauma and the violence. I think that's also a byproduct of how the media presents it too. I know I went on a rant there, but
No, no, go here. So I 100% wholeheartedly agree. And this conversation really, I love the rants, right? Because I think when people get into their moments, they spit truth, right? And so I encourage the
Mhm.
rants. I support them, and I appreciate the way you talked about the ripple effects of trauma. And a couple of the other conversations that I've had, we've been having a very similar conversation around the ripple effects outwards, right? Like that gun violence isn't just between two people. It's between those
Mhm.
people, their families, the community. And I think, one of the things that I definitely want to highlight is this devaluing of community. And
Mhm.
I think that is so important to name because I think a part of what happens within that, right, is we devalue ourselves. And so the thought about picking up that gun or taking that life, there's no longer value to that person. Um,
Mhm.
and that's hugely, hugely problematic.
And I think we see with a lot of people that have been victims of violence, we see that devaluing. reflect in on themselves. That's a problem, I think, a huge societal problem. But a lot of people from disinvested communities, a lot of people who have had access to a lot of things stripped, when societal factors or byproducts of societal factors like violence are inflicted upon them, they begin to kind of internalize that. They might feel ashamed about that, or they might feel like that reflects on them as a person, or it reflects on their character. But it really doesn't. It speaks more about the person that inflicted it. It speaks more about the system that created it. But that devaluation, we definitely see that, or I definitely see that, especially with my young people, unfortunately, go inward as well.
Hmm. And so I think you talked about something really important, right? Like this larger systemic issue that we see every day. And so for me, when I talk about gun violence, right, it's also around like the violence that we're seeing is a part of a larger issue that we have to address. And I'm just curious if you're seeing that in your work or how that shows up for the work that you're doing.
Oh, definitely. At the root of, I mean, when almost every young person I talk to that has been a victim of violence, uh, or especially, and let me say, I work with some middle schoolers, but mostly teens. So these are older young people. Money is the root of a lot of it. Some of them were complete bystanders. Some of them, even when we think about some of the risks young people take today, some of the risky behaviors they engage in, money is at the root of a lot of it. And, a lot of people say you shouldn't think like that, but we live in a place, and somebody said something very interesting to me. They said, other than the library, shout out to Free Library, shout out to Logan, where in the city can you go and not be expected to spend money? We've made that so tied to being able to not just live comfortably, but we've made that so tied to even just being able to exist in this world. uh, People are going to, sometimes take risky behaviors to do it. And when you make it, when you create the illusion that it's so scarce, sometimes people do desperate things for it as well. So I think sometimes we talk about solutions, but really what we need to do is try solutions. I mean, so many people, so many studies, be they private, be they academic, be they municipally funded, have pointed to systemic things like poverty as roots of violence, but we never try any fixes geared towards that.
That's real. Or they don't take into account, there's things like Reaganomics, right, with the trickle down effect that like, no, that doesn't work, right?
And I personally
There's
feel like we're in the second round of that. Now we're trying to attract all these businesses. Yes, come to Philadelphia, grow your business, create whatever this tech culture, this business culture that you want to create, and it's going to trickle down and spread out. But it needs to be intentional. I feel like economic, kind of stimulus. I know that's a loaded term right now, but economic stimulus plans, even municipal, presented by the city for the citizens, they're not intentional. It has like a trickle down type of basis, or it feels like maybe if we do this or this or this, money will end up getting in. But I think it needs to be intentional, and it needs to be explicit in addressing poverty, and it needs to be direct. Like, not a voucher for this, a voucher for that. About some people out here, they just need money. They need money to live. They need money to be comfortable. And I think if we could assist them in that way, of course, things are always going to happen, unfortunately. But I think when you can curb the desperation a lot of people in our city rightfully feel, uh, then we'll see the violence step back a little bit, or not even a
no,
little bit. I think a significant step back.
no, I appreciate that, especially mm, so like so the city of Philadelphia is going through this huge wave of gentrification, like let's just name it, right?
Hmm.
And I I love the way like when we're having this conversation, right, we have to connect the gentrification that's happening in our community and the economic desperation, right? Like those two things go hand in hand because a part of
Hmm.
what we see, right, is property taxes are skyrocketing. The cost of living is skyrocketing, right? And so then if you can't meet your basic human needs, what are you doing? How do you meet those needs? And unfortunately, You know, some of our young people do engage in risky behaviors or street-based economies in an attempt to survive, and that should
Mm-hmm.
not be the case. That it
Not at
should
all.
not be the case, and that
And not
absolutely
even
right
just
is a
not
part of the problem.
survive how you need to, but you can't even begin to formulate or picture a path for yourself. You might be, a young person in your late teens, early 20s, ready to take that next step out in life. But, everywhere you look, they want XYZ amount for an apartment, this, that. You don't even see a path for yourself out. So a lot of people are not only trying to live, they're just trying to create a path for themselves. They might not even see the risky behaviors they're taking part in as a permanent thing, but they literally just do not see a path out for themselves. And especially, I feel like a lot of our young people or younger people, because I'm including myself in that, even though I'm a little bit older, are jaded. I mean, I'm around 28, so I think if you're in that 25 to 35 range, when we were, young teens, we lived through that murder capital era, and now we see it all over again. And everybody doesn't have access to seeing, other sides. So, I mean, imagine living through that cycle. You're going to have some jadedness, you're going to have some hopelessness, and I mean, you're going to feel like there's really no option.
Right, especially when it's coming back around again. Right,
Exactly.
it's
And I
like
think the what's been missing through all this is really no basis in history. I haven't really heard that era, invoked or spoken of. Uh, we never rectified that era. I mean, you got an entire generation of people that walked around traumatized. If you remember, anybody listening and can remember that, people telling you, don't be out. If you see a group of people, don't walk past them. Avoid this, avoid that. So you have an entire generation that's traumatized, that was never addressed. And now we're having another wave of that traumatization through violence that's also not addressed. And a lot of the people participating in and that may be perpetuating some of that violence are the same people that were traumatized by it so many years ago, that just never had the opportunity to have it expressed or addressed or anything like that. So it's a vicious cycle, and we don't even pay lip service to the history.
no, you're right. You're absolutely right. And it's interesting is in the conversations that I've been having, right? Like we haven't hit that note, right? And I think it's definitely important to recognize it, to name right generational trauma that exists and how it perpetuates, um, the cycle of violence that we're seeing right now, right? Like this didn't come from nowhere, right? Like there is a
Mm-hmm.
reason why we're looking at the world that we're looking at today.
Exactly.
Um, that no, you're absolutely right, and it's interesting, right? Because a lot of folk that I've been talking to are like, it's COVID. We thought the violence would have went down, right? You can't be outside, but the reality is that with COVID, people are even more desperate at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And trying to survive, and elected leaders ain't really doing a whole lot about it. At least
No, not at
not
all.
in ways that is productive.
Because now not only do people feel desperate, they feel alienated. They don't feel a part of a community. They don't feel a part of a group. They don't feel a part of, really anything. If you're kind of by yourself, your usual outlets are closed. You're not seeing the people around you like you usually do. So now you might be feeling desperate, but you're already feeling alienated from your community, and you're feeling alienated from all those support systems that typically keep people not in line, but kind of, that kind of everybody has their own system of checks and balances. It might be people around you, it might be your friends, your family, but when you're alienated from them and you're alienated from the access to things that make your life easier, I think that's the combo we see. Uh, and I think when we really think about violence as a byproduct of other forms of lack of access or alienation, like economic alienation, then we really should have seen this coming. I think, the idea that it was going to go back from COVID was kind of just it wasn't rooted in reality. It's rooted in the idea that, violence pops off because people outside doing stuff and it just pops off. I don't think it was rooted in the reality that it really is a manifestation of systemic problems.
Absolutely. But you know what? But what's interesting, right, is in my community and when I talk to people on the ground, right? Like not our thought leaders, right? But
Right.
people on the ground, like our conversations was it's about to get real wild out here, right? Like that was the conversation
Mhm.
that we were having. right? It's like, oh, it's gonna get ugly out here. People aren't gonna have access to food, especially with like the way supermarkets shut down and then started limiting things, or the first wave of people kind of went in. Like when I went to the supermarket, it was empty, and I'm sitting there like, oh, how am I? Oh, I'm gonna have to figure out them. And I think you're right, right? I think that this particular moment that we're in, it was, I don't think there was any root in reality or even understanding of like what traditionally happens in moments of scarcity and fear and isolation.
Mhm.
I think you're right. I don't think it was. I think communities were having real conversations, but I think policymakers and people who had the responsibility to provide those essential services and resources, they weren't, right? Like, I don't think it was rooted in reality of the times or of the
They
moment or
did it in
history.
such a way that it looked like all out collapse. So all desperation or fear or isolation is going to be cranked up to 10 because not only did it, okay, it's a little bit delayed, but it's like, okay, you waiting for unemployment for your 6 week. You still haven't heard anything about these benefits. You got to pay your rent. You haven't, like, it manifested as nearly full on, not even nearly full on collapse. We saw these systems that we have don't work. And I mean, people already knew they didn't work, and this just confirmed it for them. So all of that, I feel like you said, people on the ground already knew was just going to amplify an already bad problem.
Hmm. Yeah. Yep. Mm. That's it's deep. Um, it's deep. It's frightening. It's heartbreaking. And it's in particular because um, there is such. I feel like there, like, as I'm older than 35. Well, I'll be older than 35 on Friday. I'll be 36.
Last week.
Oh, happy birthday! Um, um, I think oh, I forgot my train of thought. Um, which is horrible in an interview. Um, that so the violence that we're seeing, right, is played into that 20-year-old kind of space, right? Like we're watching ourselves lose a generation of young people, that is horrifying. And I think for me, right, like as someone who's older, and I'm trying to figure what do we do? Like, what we got to do, something got to get right. Like something has to change and be different. And part of what we've seen from like elected leaders or thought leaders is that they clearly ain't got the solution, right? Like they ain't got the ball, or they got the ball and they dribble on it, they fumbled.
Mm-hmm.
So so as community, what can we be doing? I think in this particular moment to help ease some of this tension, or figure out a way to be like, all right, y'all, this is not the way. Like, what could we be doing in this moment? What do you think?
Like I feel like at this time, with a lot of people talking about mutual aid, which of course I'm a huge advocate for, that must continue because people need material benefits to their lives. I'm a big advocate of emotional mutual aid as well. So I would like to say, in my opinion, and I guess I charge all adults or older people listening to this, take some time to hold space for the young people in your life. You might not have kids, but you might have cousins, nieces, nephews, young people on your block. Just hold space for them, and you don't have to do anything, miraculous. You don't have to give them all these answers. You don't have to preach their ear off, but just take some time to allow them to say what's on their mind. Don't force it. Don't try to push them into it, but just create a culture in your family, in your home, in your neighborhood, on your block, where you are asking young people what's going on with them. Not providing commentary on what you think is going on with young people, not telling young people what they need to do, not telling them what happened back in your day in a negative way, because we know telling stories and sharing experiences is an incredible way to bond, especially with young people, but not if it's in a negative way and you're saying yours is better and theirs is lesser. But create a culture in our communities where young people know they can share what's going on with them. So that's one of the things I'm always an advocate for within our communities. And I think it has to start small. Like I said, don't rush them into it, don't push them into it, but just slowly start to create a culture where young people feel like they can interact with you, talk to you, listen to you. And I charge everybody to do it. A lot of times we critique parents, but we know parents are up against a lot. We know a lot of parents don't have the access to all the things they need to support them. So I say don't just, place it all on the parents. I feel like a lot of people know the old adage, it takes a village to raise a child, but they don't really want to commit to doing it. And even in my own life, I talk to young people all the time. So even in my own neighborhood, my own family, sometimes I feel burnt out. So I'm not just talking to everyone else, I'm talking to myself too, but really be intentional about cultivating a culture and feeling in whatever space you're in with young people where they can really come to you.
So I wholeheartedly agree. I do the same thing. And at times a brother can get burnt out. Um, and so it's interesting. So I just had a conversation where I brought that exact thing up, right? Like it takes a village to raise a child. And the response I got was, well, the village is scared, right? The village is scared.
Mm-hmm.
This is not these young people these days is so they're so different, and we hear that, and I feel like every generation that has ever happened has heard that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that we're that generation is horrible, they're worse than we were. And I guess part of it for me, right, is then what do we do, right, if we're too scared to engage with
Mm-hmm.
this generation of young people because they wildin', then what do we do?
Uh, I think, well, first off, I think that reaction, because I do hear that a lot, is based off of the fact that most people's base level or base form of interaction with young people is antagonistic. And actually, when you start talking like that, it's actually dehumanizing. Like when you're like, yeah, we can't even talk to them, but they're humans at the end of the day. I think most people engage with young people, especially within our community sometimes, especially sometimes some elders, their base level of engaging with our young people is already antagonistic. So your fear is coming out of maybe them addressing you or calling you out or confronting you about your antagonism towards them. So that's why I was saying earlier, we really have to change and be intentional about how we communicate with them. Uh, and I feel like, even if past that you're still feeling nervous, then it's up to you calling somebody else. If you're an older person, you feel nervous, let call in somebody else in your community or in your sphere to talk to them. Start off small. Walk into the store. Hey, what's up with y'all? How y'all feeling today? I think you'll find most people say good, chilling, what's up? What's up over here? How you feeling? At the end of the day, I feel like through, just constant barragement of the crimes, constant highlighting of the negative, right? We don't really highlight the positive of what our young people do, and just the media blast. It really dehumanizes some of our young people, children, to the point where even people in our own community start to internalize that. And remember, like I was saying, that devaluation that violence brings, the devaluation through violence trauma, it kind of dehumanizes our young people. So I tell people that feel like that, really call into question why you feel like that, how you engage with them, what brought that fear about to you. So I think a lot of this is going to start with people, older people, even younger older people, because they feel that same way too. Really interrogating how they see and speak about our young people.
Oh, all right now. I agree. Like I think that really is it. And I mean, I've had I've had my share of young people where I might have said what's up and they looked at me sideways like, who are you? Why are you talking to me? That's
Right, but
fine.
keep it pushing. Exactly.
That's fine. And then when I see you tomorrow, I'm gonna ask the same question. And when I see you the next day, I'm gonna ask the same question to the point where they be like, all right, yo,
Exactly.
I'm all right. I'm all right.
Right.
How
Exactly.
you doing today? Because they're so
Exactly. Exactly.
tired.
Even if they're being smart. And that's what I mean when I say we create a culture of it, because it's not going to pop off right away. You're not going to say, hey, what's up? And suddenly somebody that you never spoke to, yeah, I'm going through it. I'm stressed. My lights turned off. That's not going to happen. They're
Right.
not going to come with you. They're not going to, you're not going to say, hey, what's up once, and they're going to be like, you know what, I'm leaving the streets. That's not going to happen. So that's why I talk about really trying to create a culture and holding space for them in any way, even if it's just what's up with no response. As a counselor, sometimes I'm in a group, nobody talks. Sometimes I do a one-on-one, nobody talks. And I'm okay with that. Like, I just know that's their process, but I still want you to know when you're ready to, or when you want to, or even if you just want to, talk about whatever, not relevant to anything deep. I want you to know it's possible, and I'm going to be there for you, and I'm going to listen.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that is a beautiful way to end. Is create space for young people, right? Like that's one of the ways that we can actually actively address the issue of gun violence, and that's not something that we have to wait for an elected leader to do. That's something we can take on ourselves. It's just by creating the space to talk.
Yes, and I also wrote something up not too long ago just about some ways you can create space for young people, some ways you can create space where young people feel free to maybe discuss or not discuss some risky behaviors they may be engaging in, some ways you can, engage with them about the risk of risky behaviors, and I will gladly get that to you to share out with the Logan community for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And if folk have questions or want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Yes, you can reach me at K Graves, like a graveyard, Graves, K Graves at AVP, Phila, PHILA.org.
Awesome. Uh, Thank you so much for being here, for
It was
sharing
my
your
pleasure.
time, your knowledge.
My
Um,
pleasure.
Logan Community, this was dope. Again, help me in appreciating Corey for being here. Again, just so y'all know, we do have an upcoming Teen Tween Book Club. OBTW, we have a Teen Tween Book Club coming up. So if you know some young
Awesome.
people that's all around gun
Definitely.
violence, let's link them. Um, 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 and again, this is an ongoing series, so there will be more conversations with different community members. Um, Parents of victims of gun violence, people who have experienced gun violence themselves. And we will definitely keep you up to date. So, we're also planning a visual, but as soon as we know, you will know. So, COVID is a thing and it's horrible. Um,
Hmm.
but once it's safe for us to do so, we will absolutely be gathering together and holding these programs and creating space for a community really to come together and really identify some ways that we could be doing some healing work to really address some of the trauma that we've experienced from gun violence. Um, Thank you again.
Thank you,
Um,
Fred. Thank you, Logan community. And thank you, Soul Shots, as an amazing project. Everybody, I know the library's not open yet, but even just Google it before you go down. Make sure you see it in the library, but it's an amazing project. Thank y'all so much.
Absolutely. And we'll see y'all. I'll see y'all soon.